If you've been in a car accident and you're worried about being stuck with medical bills and other expenses, you may be asking yourself, do I need a lawyer for my car accident? In this video, I'll reveal the 8 signs that you need a lawyer using my client Ellie's car accident, and when you may not need an attorney for your car crash.
I'm getting teary just thinking about it because it's just like any typical, young person. I love dancing. It's one of my passions. Just going out and enjoying a good time with my kids, doing amusement park.
She decided to take a nap in the backseat of a friend's car on a road trip, but suddenly she was in a car crash.
I felt like I was floating, and when I opened my eyes, I was this close to my friend's face in the back seat, and I didn't quite understand why I was so close to her face until I put 2 and 2 together and I realized the car is spinning right now. I knew I had to jump out of that car because my next biggest fear was there a gas leak? Is there a fire? Is the car going to explode with me in it? So I had to step out of the car onto my broken leg, and I immediately collapsed on the ground. That was my biggest fear, was how bad it is and will I ever walk again. The paramedics were very good to me. They actually gave me pain meds while I was on the ground and on the road still. They instantly put an IV in me while I was on the pavement and made sure that I was sedated so that I wouldn't be in such pain. The trip to the hospital was crying and excruciating pain. I remember it felt like what could have been 10-minute ride. It felt like hours because of how much pain I was in. I went to sleep knowing that I was going to get surgery, but I didn't know that they were going to insert a rod through my knee, and I woke up to that surprise. And that was a whole different excruciating pain. I've never contacted a lawyer before, so I didn't know exactly how they worked. So I was afraid that I had to have money up front to hire a lawyer to get the ball rolling. And that was my main thing, is I didn't have any funds to hire a lawyer. So I didn't know how that worked. And so I was afraid that I would just get turned down or that it just wasn't going to work. So I was afraid of that. Because it's, you just never know. Bad done and corruption out there, you never know. That's why you have to be very careful with who you choose to represent you.
About 9 days after the crash, Ellie called my law firm and we spoke. The first reason she needed a lawyer was because she had a big injury. This meant more money was at stake. There's 2 reasons why. When you have a serious injury, the full value of your pain and suffering is much higher. First, I'll reveal what I consider a serious injury, and then I'll reveal what the full value of pain and suffering is and why it's much higher. The following are just a few of the many injuries that are serious: a broken bone, a torn ligament, tendon, or muscle, a brain injury, a bad burn, or a herniated disc that is causing pain. But those aren't the only injuries that are serious. I also consider a serious injury to be one that has a major negative effect on your life. I said that if you have a serious injury, the full settlement value of your injury is higher. This is because serious injuries usually have a much bigger related pain and suffering value than a minor injury. For example, a broken leg like the one that Ellie had is usually worth much more than a more minor injury like back pain. But again, I'm talking about the full value of your pain and suffering claim. Even if your case has a high full value, it doesn't mean that you will get paid for the entire full value. As you'll see in a moment, Ellie's case is a perfect example of why not. You often won't get paid the full value of your case even if a driver or owner of the vehicle that caused your crash was careless. This may happen if the driver or owner of the vehicle that caused your crash doesn't have insurance or enough of it. When I first spoke with Ellie on the phone, her big concerns were, did she have a case? If yes, was it a good case? How much was it worth? And how long would it take? If I was injured like her, I'd want those answers. She was asking good questions and was smart for calling a lawyer. One sign that she needed a lawyer is the following. It was impossible to answer any of these 4 questions based on the facts that she gave me, but she didn't know that. I'm not faulting her for not knowing that these questions couldn't be answered at that moment. What I'm pointing out is this. It takes a huge amount of experience to know whether it's even useful asking those questions so early on. In a moment, I'll answer those questions and you'll see why I couldn't answer them at that time. If you're asking any of those questions, it's my opinion that you should hire a lawyer or at least speak with one. This is because these are what I call level 1 questions, meaning they are really basic. You'll see that there are many other important questions that need to be asked. One of the great things about speaking with a lawyer is the following. Attorneys don't charge to speak with you about your car accident. If you speak with a lawyer, then at a minimum, ask the lawyer what benefit they can add. There's a large chance that the attorney will point out many issues that you haven't even thought about. Ellie wanted to know if she had a good case, but there was a huge piece of information that she didn't know to give me. And I think it's just as important, maybe even more important, than all 4 questions that she asked. In fact, it's not just the basic questions that you may be asking that make it clear that you need a lawyer. There's something that can even be a bigger clue that you need a lawyer. It's the questions that you're not asking. The big question that Ellie or anyone in a car accident should ask is, do I have uninsured motorist on my auto insurance policy? And if not, does a relative who I live with have uninsured motorist coverage? If you don't know why I'm asking those questions, you should get a lawyer. I asked Ellie those questions because she didn't know if the van or driver of the car that she was in had insurance or how much. With so many uninsured drivers on the road, I assume that other drivers are uninsured or underinsured, at least until I hear otherwise. Uninsured motorist coverage is also called UM coverage. If Ellie had UM coverage through herself or her relatives that she lived with, there'd for sure be coverage. This UM insurance would ensure that she gets paid. And this would increase the odds that she had a good case. If you're like most people, you want a sure bet. And the fastest way to do this is to see if you're entitled to UM coverage. Yet, most people that are hurt in car accidents don't look for UM coverage. If you don't know how to look for UM coverage and when it applies, I highly recommend getting a lawyer. Ellie didn't own a car or live with a relative who owned a car, which meant that now we'd have to hope that the other drivers had big insurance policies. We wanted them to have sizable insurance policies because Ellie had a serious injury. If she had a minor injury, it'd be okay if they had smaller insurance policies. And if Ellie had a minor injury, she might not even need a lawyer. This is because minor injuries often aren't worth a whole lot. There were things in Ellie's power that she could do to start the process of getting answers to the questions she had. But most people who are in car accidents don't know the steps to take that may massively increase their odds of getting paid. Another instance where you should get a lawyer is if you don't know how much your case is likely worth. The reason is that you can't rely on what the claims rep tells you about the value of your case. Some claims adjusters say,
"My job is to pay what we owe, nothing more and nothing less."
You can believe them at your own risk. Let me know what you think after you see all the sneaky tricks they pulled in Ellie's case. But there's an even bigger reason that you may need an attorney for your car accident. It's that most people who get injured in car accidents are clueless to how much their pain and suffering is worth. They often think their pain and suffering is worth much less than it is. And as a result, the insurance company may make you an offer and you assume that it is fair or close to fair. Too many victims fall for this trap, believing the initial offer reflects the true value of their pain and suffering. They often end up settling for this amount and end up receiving far less than they deserve. When the insurance company makes you a low offer, they often use a negotiation technique called anchoring. They want you to believe that their offer is fair or close to fair. In a moment, you'll see how the van's insurance company used this anchoring technique in Ellie's case to try to get her to settle for a small amount. This next reason is one of the big reasons to hire an attorney for your car accident. At the scene, the police officer gave Ellie a form that's called the Driver Exchange of Information. It said that Westfield Insurance Company insured the van. It listed the insurance company for the owner of the car that Ellie was in as a rental. It also listed the driver of the van as Vehicle 1. That's the vehicle that the officer usually blames for causing the crash. But that document didn't tell me 3 crucial things. 1, how much insurance the van had. 2, did the driver of the car that Ellie was in have insurance on his own car? And 3, did Ellie's driver add insurance when he rented the car? To keep it simple, I may call the car that Ellie was a passenger in Ellie's car, even though it wasn't actually hers. The day Ellie hired me, I requested the crash report. It's much more detailed than the form that you get at the accident scene. What did you think when you learned that the police officer had cited the driver of the other vehicle, the van, with an improper lane change.
I was very mad because I felt like that other driver was in its work vehicle, so you would expect a person that is on the clock to be more responsible, especially when they are on the road, doing in heavy traffic in the middle of Tampa. I would expect for someone like that to be more responsible when switching lanes like that. So I was very, very upset.
In the crash report, something else stuck out to me. A witness told the police officer that right before the crash, he observed the car that Ellie was in accelerate downhill at approximately 60 miles per hour in a 50-mile-an-hour zone. The witness believed the speed of V2 contributed to the collision. V2 was the car that Ellie was in. This was the first I'd heard of the driver of Ellie's car possibly sharing responsibility for causing the crash. If the witness was correct that Ellie's car was going 5 to 10 miles an hour over the speed limit, some fault could be placed on the driver of Ellie's car, which could be a big deal. Here's why. Let's say 25% fault was placed on Ellie's driver for speeding and 75% was placed on the van for improperly switching lanes. The effect is that the at-fault driver only owes in proportion to their percentage of fault. This means that Ellie's driver's insurance company would only owe 25% of Ellie's case value. This is because we're assuming the driver of Ellie's car was 25% at fault, and the van's insurance company would owe 75% of Ellie's claim. We're assuming that the van was 75% at fault. A driver's bodily injury insurance pays for your injury claim if someone other than you is at fault. It pays for your medical bills, lost wages, and pain and suffering. It's also called BI coverage. I was hoping that the car that Ellie was in had at least $50,000 in BI coverage. We're assuming that the pain and suffering for Ellie's broken leg with surgery was worth around $200,000. Medicaid paid just a couple of $1,000s for her medical bills, and she didn't owe anything out of pocket. So if the car that Ellie was in had $50,000 in BI coverage, that could pay around 25% of the value of Ellie's case. If the car and the van each had plenty of insurance, then there's no issue. This is because each would have enough insurance to pay for the value of Ellie's case. I was hoping that the van's insurance policy was at least $150,000. This is because I thought the van was around 75% at fault for the crash. Basically, I wanted them to have enough coverage to pay for 75% of the value of Ellie's broken leg and surgery. Again, this is because the driver appeared to be 75% at fault. So the fourth instance that you need to hire a lawyer for your car crash is if you don't know how the other driver's percentage of fault affects your payout. I called the van's insurance company Westfield so they could set up a claim for this accident. The insurance company can't pay you until a claim is set up. When I spoke with Westfield's claim operator, they said that the owner of the van didn't report the accident to them. I assume that the van driver's employer didn't report it because they feared their insurance premiums would increase. We still had no idea if the van had liability insurance, and if so, how much. One stressful thing about car crash cases is not knowing if the other vehicle has liability coverage. Often you have to depend on the driver or drivers who caused your crash to have insurance coverage. And many times they don't have any insurance or very little. Westfield assigned a claims adjuster just 2 days after we spoke. A claims adjuster is the representative who will be deciding whether to pay you and how much. I asked the Westfield claims rep if she'd accepted liability for causing the crash. Basically, I was asking her if she accepted that the van driver, her insured, was 100% at fault for causing the crash. She said no and told me that she placed the following blame: 75% on the van driver due to the improper lane change, and 25% on the driver of the car that Ellie was a passenger in. But another reason that you should get a lawyer is the following: what you say to the claims adjuster can be used against you. On the other hand, they can't use what your lawyer tells them against you. In addition, a lawyer knows what not to say to them, whereas you may get emotional or anxious and say something that destroys your case. I've seen this happen many times with people that don't hire lawyers, and it's often impossible to fix the mistakes that they've made. The next instance where you need a lawyer is easy to spot. In this case, the van's insurance company told me that the driver of the car Ellie was in was speeding. They'd said this because the crash caused the van to flip over several times. The adjuster said, therefore, the car must have been speeding. If she could put fault on the driver of the car that Ellie was in, then the van's insurance company would owe Ellie much less money. This would be okay if the car was Ellie in had enough insurance coverage. This is because there would be enough car insurance to cover the driver of the car's percentage of fault. But at this point, we didn't know if the car Ellie was in was insured. To prove that Ellie's driver wasn't speeding, I needed to download the event data recorder inside his vehicle. It's called an EDR. Every modern car has an EDR or black box that records the car's speed for about 5 seconds before the crash. But there's a catch. You need to hire an expert who has a device to download this data, and experts charge at least $500 per car. Most people that are injured in car accidents aren't willing or able to pay the $500 to get this black box. So if you don't know when you need the black box, hire a lawyer. You should also hire an attorney if you aren't willing or able to pay an expert to download it. So I hired a company to download the black box data for both the car and the van. More on that in a bit. Another instance where you should get a lawyer is the following. If you don't know how to get the other driver's insurance company to tell you their insured's limit of liability coverage and whether there are any coverage defenses. It helps you know how much to settle for and whether to settle if you have this valuable information. I've seen people fail to get the proper insurance information and get stuck with thousands of dollars in bills. We requested that the van's insurance company send us this info in writing. The van had plenty of insurance. This was great news since the van appeared to be around 75% at fault for causing the crash. And then we got some really bad news. We then learned that the car that Ellie was in only had $25,000 in BI coverage. This meant that the most that the insurance company for the driver of Ellie's car would pay any one person was $25,000 for their injury claim. This was bad news because I believe the driver of Ellie's car was 25% at fault, and 25% of a broken leg with surgery case is worth much more than $25,000. So this means that Ellie wouldn't fully get compensated by the insurance company for the driver of the car that she was in. Now we waited to see how fast the black box said the driver of Ellie's car was going right before the crash. We hoped that it would show that he was going the speed limit, because in that instance, we could place 100% blame on the van, and the van had enough insurance coverage to pay Ellie for the actual value of her case. Geico then made a decision to pay out the $25,000 per person and $50,000 per accident bodily injury limits. The most that Ellie could get from Geico was $25,000. The most that everyone making a claim could get combined from Geico was $50,000. Remember, there were other passengers in the car that Ellie was in. However, there wasn't a guarantee that Ellie was going to get the $25,000 max per person under Geico's insurance. I argued that Ellie's injuries were more serious than everyone else who was in the crash. My goal was for Ellie to get the max payout of $25,000. I didn't want the other passengers to get paid from the same limited amount, because if the other passengers got payouts, it would lower the amount that Ellie could get. Geico sent us a $25,000 check, but I didn't want to deposit it for 2 reasons. Most accident victims don't know these reasons, and it can destroy their case and leave them stuck with huge medical bills. And that's another reason to hire a lawyer. First, I wanted the driver to complete a form to see if he had other insurance or assets. I recently had a driver pay us $15,000 from his own money on top of his $100,000 of car insurance. But that's rare, so don't count on that happening. Second, if I deposited Geico's check, Ellie couldn't sue the car driver and he wouldn't be a defendant at trial. This would be a huge problem because the jury might place more fault on him if they don't see him being sued. The more fault the jury places on the car driver, the less fault they would assign to the van driver. And the less fault on the van driver, the less the van driver's insurance company would owe us. Then I got an email that changed everything. The expert who downloaded the black box sent me a report revealing the car's speed right before the crash. My heartbeat raced as I looked at it. A lot of money was on the line and Ellie's financial future was at stake. I couldn't believe what I saw. I felt like I was falling off a building, literally. Just 1 second before the crash, the car that Ellie was in was going 96 miles per hour in a 50-mile-an-hour speed zone.
I was really upset to learn that he was going that fast. And him, them knowing, I'm a mom, we have kids to go back home to. We hadn't even got to the party yet. Why are you speeding like that fast? I just felt like they didn't even consider the person in the car with them. That person was not even thinking at all. We were just being so irresponsible, and it was very hurtful to think that a friend that I considered a friend would put my life in danger that bad. Like, I'm lucky that I didn't lose my life in that crash. And then me being the only one that got hurt, was just like double whammy.
The fact that Ellie's driver was going 96 miles per hour when the speed limit was 50 miles per hour was horrible for Ellie's case. This is because most of the blame for the crash now shifted to the car's driver and not the van. But Ellie's driver only had $25,000 in insurance, and Geico had already sent us the check. Therefore, Geico wasn't liable above the $25,000. The fact that the car Ellie was in was speeding so fast also meant the van driver had much less fault. So their insurance company now owed Ellie much less. I told Ellie the news and she was bummed out. And then things got worse. The van's insurance company said that their insured driver did nothing wrong and they are denying liability, meaning they weren't going to pay a penny. What did you think when I told you that news?
I just felt like, how can that be? There has to be a certain line that gets drawn to what's fair and what's unfair. They both had fault. Like, I was going fast, but this one also changed lanes, which caused the impact. I feel like I was being lied to.
I wasn't about to give up, but you need to know when the insurance company is correct in denying liability. Sometimes they are. If you fight them when they're correct, you're just wasting your most valuable resource, your time. And that's the last thing that you want to do. Around 19 years ago, I handled an injury claim that I shouldn't have. I wasted an enormous amount of time. If no one else did anything wrong in your case, don't make my same foolish mistake. A car accident lawyer is much more likely than you to know when it's worth your time to fight the insurance company. That's another reason to get a lawyer. I persuaded the van's insurance company to make an offer, but they offered just $25,000. We were happy that they went from denying Ellie's case to offering $25,000, but this wasn't enough given her broken leg and surgery. So I fought back. What did you think when I got the van's insurance company to offer $50,000 to settle?
I was very happy, very happy. We went from nothing to 50, which was definitely a start. I started seeing bright colors at that point. I said, okay, now we're getting somewhere. And okay, so I saw, some hope. I really did. We went from nothing to something.
But when the van driver's lawyer offered $50,000, she said that the top authority she had to offer was $50,000. Basically, she was implying she couldn't offer more money. There was a point in the claim where the van's insurance adjuster said, in order for them to offer anything above $50,000, we had to come down or below $100,000. If you had this claim and you were the one representing yourself, what would your response to that have been?
I probably would have done it, but it's not what I wished for. If I would have done it by myself, I wouldn't know what I could do at that point to convince them to go above. I probably would have taken it, even though I would still feel like that was not even remotely close to what I was deserved, just to try to get something at a desperate time, with those desperate times of not having any income.
I wasn't going to fall for this insurance company trick. I played hardball and eventually got a $100,000 settlement with the van's insurance company. With Geico's combined $25,000 settlement, the total settlement in the case was $125,000. Ellie got over $80,300 in her pocket after my lawyer's fees and costs and paying back Medicaid.
I'm getting teary just thinking about it because it's a new beginning for us, I get to put my mom in a house, so she can retire. That means a lot. And I'm very fortunate for that. She deserves the world. So at least,
So do you.
Yeah.
We all do, right? No, that's one thing I like about my job one of the many things I like about the job is I get to deal with all different types of people. And a lot of my clients you have paycheck to paycheck. And as we all know, life is tough. It's not easy. Yeah. And so I see people at some of their lowest points. Well, I've seen a lot of different stuff with clients, everything from people wanting to kill themselves due to an accident. I've had clients like that, and then feeling better, then watching them heal and get better and change their attitude and down. It's tough, but you've had a great attitude, and especially when you make the comment that, let's say, it was just my leg, although it was serious, it could have been a lot worse. I find that people that have more of a positive attitude like that are typically happier than the people that just stay a victim for 3, 5, and multiple years after their accident. So points to having a more positive spin on it. But even if you know when to hire a lawyer, you still need to know the questions to ask before you hire them. Otherwise, you could be making a huge mistake and hire the wrong one. And you'll have wasted tons of time and maybe lots of money too. I reveal the best questions to ask an injury lawyer before you hire one in the video that's on screen here, link in the description below. And if you've been injured in an accident in Florida and think someone else is at fault, click the link in the description below to see if I could be the lawyer for you.